That's it, yeah.
The American Accounting Association took on that name, I believe, in 1935. Prior to that, it had been the American Association of University Instructors in Accounting. That's really a mouthful. Were you active in the American Accounting Association prior to going to the commission? Did you go to the meetings?
I went to the meetings while I was a kid.
Were there any individuals that you particularly had other academics that you had strong relationships with before going to the commission?
That's pretty hard to do.
Pretty hard to recall.
Well, I met so many people. It's hard to single out anyone as over and above someone else.
Eventually, you
I might make one observation here about the person who's not gone. That Earl King was not a CPA, but in looking at his records, I think you have to agree he probably had a wider, broader experience in all phases of accounting than many CPAs ever acquired.
Well, I remember he worked for a brokerage just prior to the market
at the
crash.
time of the crash.
Yeah, I remember
so
that.
Gave him the background for the brokerage
And
business.
he was involved as a controller of businesses that I think he did start out in public accounting practice.
Yes, he was.
And up, I guess, along the East Coast. I remember he gave a speech in Richmond one time and referred to the fact that he had been an audit in Richmond maybe in the first decade of the century. So you're right, he had a tremendous amount of experience.
He had a very wide acquaintance with all aspects of the subject.
Well, that gets me back to the point about your own initial public accounting experience. Which firm did you, when you left Illinois, you worked in public practice for a couple of years. What firm did you go to work for when you left Illinois?
Well, when I went to work in those days, I graduated from the university with a master's in 24. In those days, the student had to go to the accountant's office to be interviewed.
Yeah, they didn't come to campus.
They didn't come down to the campus in Groves. And sit in the hallway waiting for their number to come up. So, where were we?
Well, we were just thinking about your first couple of years of accounting in public practice.
Well, I didn't name the firm.
That's right.
I think it's all right to name the firm. It's been buried for a long time. Only a few people know about it. But at the time that I was interviewed, the firm's name was Reckitt, Bennington, and Leclerc. Leclerc was an American and a British staff firm. But Leclerc was the one who saw the importance of lending without income taxes. So they got into the big leagues in Chicago by getting some very good clients, primarily for tax purposes.
Tax clients, yeah.
So I think that's very important. That's the way it started in Chicago. They just came on the scene at the right time. Timing is so important.
Amen.
In many things we do in life. So that was one. Then the next move was, I get these in order now. I don't know who made the approach to the other, but there was a merger with Wellington.
Oh, okay, Wellington. All right.
Wellington.
Scoville and Wellington firm.
Yeah, Scoville Wellington. Now there was an interesting person. Mr. Wellington was a very interesting man. He was playing tennis at 75.
Yeah.
And he was a picture of good health, I guess, all of that.
Yeah, he was.
Then the next step was the merger with Lybrand, Ross Willis, and Montgomery.
So that firm merged up to what is now the Coopers and Lybrand.
That's right. It's a change of name and the emphasis on where it belonged. So, with that, I sometimes wonder if I would now be a retired partner
of Cooper's. Yeah.
of Coopers and Library.
Yeah. You, now, and after you finished the work with, you left that firm, and you went directly to Yale, and you started your teaching career when you left.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think.
Well, there was a link there that maybe I ought to mention.
Okay.
Ralph Jones had gone to Yale, called there to rebuild the accounting group. Of course, the head of it had gone to another university. So Ralph was working for Insull in Chicago. The mahogany floor business, as you hear about, and big corporations taking on college professors to drill them in what they ought to be doing for business. So I happened to be, of course, in the firm we were just talking about. And one night, I knew that Ralph was in town, and he got a hold of me. We sat down in the park, on the park bench, and discussed his whole business. The result was that I went down home to here in Urbana. The family gathered around, and I just wanted to see how they would react to me leaving employment to such a short term. And that was some people, can't you hold a job?
Yeah. Well, sure, the values are strong.
So we had a lot of family in Urbana. There was only one dissenter. Me taking the offer. And he was a professor of railway engineering. He had been in business. And he thought I was making a mistake.
To go to Yale and start teaching.
To leave the business.
To leave business. Leave the profession.
He was concerned about that.
So Ralph Jones, who...
He launched me on my career, you might say.
I guess his monograph, his AAA monograph, several years later on price level accounting is something that a lot of students get to read.
Worked together.
On that subject. Well, maybe it's time to...
so you can see I had a very early acquaintance with this business at price level. Ralph was working on that. He was the head of the accounting group, and I was the next one in line, so we were working together.
Well, that becomes the issue in the post-war period. When you get back to the commission, as a matter of fact, I don't know of anything that dominates the literature. And I guess Earl King had to wrestle with that problem, and you did too. The price level problem in public company reports.
Oh, yes.
And I just recently read some materials on that suggest that even some of the staunchest advocates of historical cost, and Sam Broad would be an example. I consider him to be a staunch advocate of historical cost prior to the post-war inflation, begins to struggle with how do you adequately, he was good at using analogies. Broad used a lot of analogies in his talking, and he used the old apples and oranges, that the dollars didn't have equal purchasing power, and even he was willing to advocate some form of restatement along adjusted lines, but the commission kind of held firm, didn't they? They stayed with historical cost during this period. And I have to, in preparation for our getting together, I have to tell you, I read one of Earl King's pieces during that period, because I knew price level was high on his agenda and it would have affected what you were doing. It seems the discovery and use of accelerated depreciation helped come to terms with this problem a little bit. Accelerated depreciation, in King's view, was a way of solving some of the problems of getting into the income statement an adequate depreciation charge without having to change all the numbers around it, because you could, if you will, front load the expenses. And he saw technology as much as activity base as justifying accelerated, depreciation. It seemed to me he was quite favorably impressed with the use of accelerated depreciation as a vehicle for price level. I wonder if that ever...
I just don't remember that
Okay.
aspect of the whole thing.
It's a paper of his that was that he gave toward I'd say 48, 49, somewhere in that period, before the Korean War broke out.
Well, one of the jobs of a staff member in the Chief of Accountant's office is to either write the first draft of the speech or help edit it when somebody else has written it.
And that may have been the time you were over
Sorry,
at... well, let's see now.